If you think your thoughts and opinions do not matter, or if you fear taking the next steps towards a better you, or if you allow other people to take free reign of your life, now is the time to put an end to these limiting beliefs. Welcome to Change Your View, a podcast that will help you take back control to have a well-lived life and the conviction that your life is to have meaning. Join Hasina Shahid Jackson in discussions aimed at overcoming the limitations of physical sight to see with spirit, hope, and faith. Each episode will empower you to develop the courage and self-assurance to go after the life you want. Here is your host, Hasina.
So, Pastor Doug, you were a fixed portfolio manager for the Montreal Bank. Tell me a little bit about that, because that was a six-figure job, I'm sure, or even more than that.
Yeah.
And you were there for 24 years.
Yeah. So I was a fixed income portfolio manager for the Bank of Montreal. Traded bonds. Was at the bank for 24 years. So I had a number of roles, but the last role I had at BMO was as a fixed income portfolio manager. And as you say, yes, it was a six-figure salary. Bonuses were hefty, very good bonuses. So the money was good. But I will say that although the money was good, I did not feel fulfilled. The entire time while I was at the bank, whenever I would have a conversation with someone, I would always tell them, if something ever happens, I'm going into education. That's my passion. So even when I worked at the bank, I always read books about education. If there was some new policy that was introduced as it related to education, I read about it, and I read more books about education than I did about business. And I was working in the business world at that particular time. And so just was always passionate about education. And on my mother's side, that's basically what you have. You have educators and you have pastors. And so right now I'm doing both. So I just feel like it's in my DNA, being a teacher right now, teaching math, as well as being a pastor. So I just feel like my mother's side, it's just in my DNA.
But imagine that, but you went in a different direction, becoming a portfolio manager for 24 years, and then suddenly life changed. So how did you feel? Because it seems to me that ultimately the creator was in the works, because you kept hinting at, if something ever happened, I'm going to go into education. So it seems there was something always behind the scenes that was going to move you into that direction, regardless of what you wanted to do.
Yeah, it
was going to happen.
Yeah, as I said, on my mother's side, there are educators and pastors, and so I just feel like that I'm just a natural teacher. That's how I feel. Others may not feel that way, but that's how I feel, that it comes natural to me, that if I put forth the effort, teaching isn't that difficult. Granted, you have to deal with, students' behavioral issues and other things, but I just feel that teaching for me is, it's a passion, but it's just not that difficult. And I think I know it all anyway. So that helps too. It was just something that I just always felt, but never really stepped out there to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and get a master's in education and go ahead and pursue teaching. At the time I was making money at the bank, and, when you're making money and you're in a specific position, you don't kind of step out there to pursue your passions. You find yourself becoming comfortable, and I hate to use the word, but even complacent at times, and not just in the career, just in everything. The money's good, and you get up, you go to work, and you come home, you have the resources to do whatever you want to do, and whatever you would like to do, you have the resources to do it. So you become comfortable.
But then one day life changed. So tell me about that day when life changed.
Oh yeah. 2013, Monday morning, normal routine, took the metro to work, got off the train, stopped at Dunkin' Donuts, grabbed some coffee, had bacon, egg, and cheese on a croissant sandwich. And this was before they were putting them on croissants. They used to always put them on bagels. I always had mine on croissants. And so grabbed that, went to work, went to the bathroom, sat down at my desk, and immediately my boss came to me and said, can I see you for a minute? And I was like, okay, okay. So, yeah, sure. So went into his office, and we always had this joke that whenever we went to his office, we would always say, "Oh, do we need to close the door?" And in normal circumstance, he'd be like, "Oh, no, you can leave the door open." But this time I said, "Do I need to close the door?" And he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh, okay." and so that day, I believe it was April 7th. It was the day of the national championship, NCAA championship. I always remember that, in 2013. And so on that day, I was downsized after 24 years. And it was just like, wow, okay. So I don't have a job anymore at BMO after 24 years of being with the company. And so I just, we had a call. Actually, we had a very good conversation. We talked about so many other things after he, informed me that I was being downsized. We talked about so many, because he and I, we had worked together. He wasn't even my boss when we started working, but he became my boss. And so we talked about so many other things. And then once people found out, people came into the office, said bye. And then, so I probably arrived at work about 8:15, probably about 9 o'clock, 9:15. I was on my way home, back home. So yeah, that was
Wow,
that day.
did you even see you didn't even see that coming, did you? I mean, there
Oh
was no
no.
way that did you ever have any inkling?
Well, we merged at the time. We had merged with a bank, M&I up in Wisconsin. And so they cut other positions. So this was like their fourth or fifth round of cuts. And so I witnessed other people being cut. Didn't think our desk would be impacted by it. Our trading desk would be impacted by it, but it was. And on that day, they not only downsized me, but they downsized a few other people. Probably it was like 6 or 7 of us who were downsized on that particular day. So of all colors, ages, everybody. So that's that's what a downsizing. It doesn't see color, doesn't see age. It's just it's, if the numbers are right, they do it.
So how did you feel, and what did you see? I mean, did you so how did you get through that hurdle and get to the next steps? And what were your next
It
steps?
was it was odd when it happened. I felt relief, and I know that sounds odd, but I did. Initially I felt relief. I was like, okay, yeah, because there were times where, at times, I was the only African American in meetings, and having to go to, uh, I managed money for corporations, and so I just felt some relief from that. But then also I had 2 boys, and my wife, and the great thing about it, though, is what I tell people is that, while you're working, make sure you save, make sure you invest, don't spend more than you make, because that's really what got me through that 1 year. Because after I was downsized, I sat down with my wife, talked to her, and just said, hey, I just want to take off a year, and not look for work, not do anything, kind of figure things out. And so, we had the means for me to do that, 1 year to do that. And I did that. And during that 1 year, I did some soul searching, and just realized it's like, okay, you know what? I've always talked about pursuing education, what's it going to take for me to do this, which then it concluded that it was going to take me going back to school to work on a second master's degree. And if I really wanted to pursue it. And I just made it up in my mind that that was something that I wanted to pursue. And that's what I did. I ended up going back to school to get a master's in education from DePaul University.
So I want to go back to, how did you see that was a route that you should go? Because you couldn't see it with your physical eyes. So what did you
Right.
use to really understand that was the direction? Because you said you spent some time really reflecting and meditating. So what did you do?
Yeah. So during that year, my prayer life really, I don't want to say increased, but it went to another level. Again, when I was making the money, I might pray, I might not pray. I wake up in the morning, whatever. But once I was downsized, it was like every morning, man, I had a devotion going. I'm praying, I'm reading scripture. And so, my prayer life went to a whole nother level. and experiences. I think about the Israelites in the book of Exodus, and after they witnessed all that God had done for them, there were times where they would forget about just how God had delivered them, how God had provided for them, and how God had sustained them. And I didn't want that experience, so I started thinking about times where God, provided for me, He sustained for me, and I did not want to forget about that. And I just said to myself at that time, then if this is something that God is truly calling me to do, that He's a provider, He's a sustainer, He's going to see me through it, right? He allowed me to prepare myself financially while I worked, to be in the situation in which I was in, financially sound. And then I just felt that doing what I felt I was called to do, that God was going to sustain me. So he had done it in the past. You know the story about me being a foster parent. Sustained me through that. Sustained me through so many other things, and that I was like, well, if God did it then, He's going to do it now. And so that is what I placed my decision on. That I felt that this is what God was calling me to, and if God is calling me to it, then He's going to be with me. He's going to sustain me. He's going to provide for me. He's going to provide for my family, and He's going to meet whatever need I have.
Wow. So I want to fast forward, because I didn't know you during that time, but I met
Right.
you. And I don't remember when. I'm always bad with years, but I met you when I was taking a discipleship one-on-one class. And one thing that always resonated with you said in the class one day, "Will you answer the call?" And you walked around the room and you looked at each one of us, and you repeated it a couple of times, and you said, "Will you answer the call?" And I was sitting there, and I'm one of the smart alecky people. I said, "Well, if the phone ring, I'm going to answer it."
Right.
That's what I
Yeah. You were that trouble student.
But what does that really mean? So what does that really mean? Will you answer the call? What does it require for you to answer that call?
It just means you saying yes and being fully committed to it, to doing whatever whatever is needed for you to accomplish it. For me, it meant if I truly wanted to teach, I needed to go back to school. So that's what I did. Oftentimes I feel that people have, or feel that they're called to something, called to do something by God, but then they start thinking about the work that's required. They start thinking about, man, it's going to require more schooling. This is going to require more training. They start thinking about the work that they're going to have to do, the sacrifices that they're going to have to make. And when they start thinking about that then is when they become discouraged. And so my thing is, answering the call is getting beyond that discouragement that you feel when you realize that this isn't just going to happen, that it's going to require some effort on your part, and in many instances some major effort on your part. And are you willing to do it? Are you willing to answer the call? Are you willing to commit fully to doing what it is you feel God has called you to do? And again, I feel like many individuals, many people feel that there's something that they want to do, but then they allow, the thought of, well, what's this going to require? How much work is this going to require? How much money is it going to require? How much time is it going to require? What sacrifices am I going to have to make? And many times people don't want to do that. And if you don't want to make those sacrifices, then you're not all in.
It's interesting that you say that. And I will say that I have returned back to school, and I'm pursuing my master's in human services.
Mm-hmm.
And it is an eye-opening experience for me because, one, I haven't been in school, I don't know. I know it's been over 20 years. And so the thing is that, and they have whole new ways that you have to respond, write your papers and stuff. And I'm sitting here going, what in the heck have I put myself into? So, and I'm having that angst because I have to learn a whole new way of writing and thinking that I didn't have to do when I was in school. However, it is challenging And it is fearful, like you said, because it's something totally different. It's taking me out of my comfort zone. However, I know that at the end it will be rewarding because it's teaching me things that I never would have thought about. So we have to be willing to put in that sacrifice and that money and that time if we really truly want something. Otherwise, you're just going to continue to coast along and do whatever comes your way and just drifting, taking whatever life gives you instead of you making and creating life for what you want. So I thank you for that. So I ask you now, because I'm sure you're still listening and meditating with God. And so right now you're teaching in the school system, correct?
Right. I teach freshman math. It's called integrated math in Whiting, Indiana.
So how do you feel about that? Is that where you see yourself staying, or are you, what do you see as your next steps? What are you doing? Or what are you listening to? What are you hearing in your spirit about what you should do, should be your next steps?
I've always felt that I bring a different perspective to education, having had the opportunity to work in corporate America for 24 years, and now being in this public arena of education, I bring a different perspective, I feel. And oftentimes I see things differently than someone who's been in education, say, for 20 some years. Right. And it's like most professions, if you've been there 20 plus years, you kind of get stuck in doing things. You become what I call a traditionalist. We do things because this is the way things have always been done. And me having the experience that I had working in corporate America, but then also, being a pastor and having the opportunity to, work on my first master's in seminary, I bring that experience as well. So that part of my life allows for me to have the interaction with the students, right? Because that spiritual side, then, so like my students are freshmen, and there are times where they do things and, I want to, get upset with them, but then I have to say, man, they're 14. They're supposed to, say dumb things and do dumb things, and not dumb that saying that they're dumb students, but it's just, you do things and we go, that was dumb, and so that's more the spiritual side of me. And so I just feel like every step and everything that I've done in my life leading up to this point has prepared me for that, for where I am right now, in my interactions with students, in my interactions with administration, and just in my approach to teaching. I take a very different approach to teaching. Although I teach math, I feel as though teaching math isn't really teaching. Really what you're teaching is you should be teaching students how to learn. Well, I took on that perspective and that understanding from working in corporate America, right? Always having to learn something new. Like you said, you haven't been in school for 20 plus years. Now you're in school. Now you're having to learn something new. And as I share with people all the time, teaching math is easy. The difficult part is convincing students that they can learn the math. And that's most of us. It's the difficult part is convincing us that we can learn new ways of having to submit papers and, having to read textbooks online. You're not buying textbooks. Everything's online, or taking an online course. You have to learn. And so my approach to teaching is not about, yes, I'm teaching math, but my approach is more than just about teaching math. It's about teaching students how to learn. Basically, that's what teaching is. It's the art and science of helping others learn, right? And so how do I convince my students that they can learn math? How do I convince my students that they can learn biology? How do I convince my students that they can learn English, right? So it's more about, it goes beyond just teaching math. It's more about teaching students how to learn and giving them strategies for learning. Because once a student realizes that he or she can learn, then there's nothing, right? I don't care what comes their way. There's nothing that they will feel will defeat them, because they now have strategies for learning. And you also realize that it takes time to learn.
That's an interesting concept that you just brought up there about teaching to learn. And I think that's in some ways where we get angst and we get afraid, because we think that to want to learn means that you are ignorant and you don't know something. And then that says that we might have a weakness or a shortfall, but instead we should see that as a strength, because that means that we're opening our mind to new ways of thinking, and thinking about new perspectives. And I love the fact that you are able to get people in there when they're young to help mold them to want to have that adventure, because that's what learning should be. I always say that learning should be an adventure, and don't make it into drudgery. So I'm thinking about, even with my schoolwork, I'm learning things that I never even thought about, like the masters in human services. Most people would be like, well, what's that? Because it's not psychology. However, human services deals with the environment that surrounds the person, that impacts their ways of thinking and their beliefs and their mindset. And that's what I really want to dwell into, is to help people really get more into and into tune with those elements, instead of saying, well, everybody's the same. No, everybody is not the same. They will not be the same. So we have to think that we're not all in the same playing field, and we all have the same background, and we all have the same benefits, because that's not true. Because I think about the young people that you're coaching and mentoring today. I'm sure that there's some in there who, and I think we had a discussion one time, there was a young boy you was trying to reach, who just was opposed to wanting to learn. So you had to be creative and trying to reach and bridge that gap.
Mm-hmm. That's the beauty of teaching, right? If we could get rid of the standardized testing and all of that, and just allow teachers to be creative in their communicating their curriculum, you would see some creative teaching. But unfortunately, everybody's concerned with the standardized testing. So you're testing to make sure that, so you're teaching math. You're not teaching to learn, you're teaching math. And if either the students get it or they don't get it, right? It comes time for them to take the standardized test. Either they know it or they don't know it. And so we could remove that. And that's one of the things I'm reading the book now about other ways to do assessments of students' learning other than using standardized testing. And if we can get beyond that and just allow teachers to teach, and allow them the creativity, because teaching is a calling. There are individuals who think that, oh, you know what, I'm tired of doing this job, let me go into teaching. No. I tell people, if you can't deal with one person, on a daily basis, imagine having 25 of them in a class with different personalities, and you having to navigate your way through that and teach a curriculum. So you have to navigate your way through all of the different behavioral issues, the different personalities, and then in addition to that, to teach a curriculum. So teaching is a calling. It's not something that, you just wake up one day and want to do. You think you do until you hit that classroom and, you realize that, you have about 6 or 7 months of this, and that's why many people don't make it after 1 year. But that's the beauty of answering God's call and being all in, whatever it is God is calling you to do. Yes, there will be hard times, there will be struggles, right? But there's a great quote that I live my life by. It says, growth requires temporary surrender of security, right? So if you want to grow, you can't grow and be secure all at the same time, right? There's going to be, especially if you're learning something new, there's going to be, a temporary surrender of you having of the security that you are currently experiencing. So there's going to be some, as you called it, angst, and there's going to be some uncertainty, and there's going to be, some doubt. It's all going to be there, right? But then the question becomes, how do you overcome it and move forward? And that's where the growth comes in.
So where do you see yourself going from here? I mean, do you see anything past the teaching? What do you see as your next calling? Because we will continue to progress. I know. So I know this is not it for you. And I think that's what I want people to understand. Don't think that this one calling you still will go in different directions. So God, he wants you to teach. I get that part. But what else do you see as being your next steps?
I will want to become like you. I want to become a publisher, right? An author, of a book. But for me, it's just more so I want to introduce policy. So I do want to become a policy maker as it relates to education. Like I said, I always feel that I bring a different, a unique perspective to whatever environment I'm in. And I think just if given the opportunity to become a policymaker in this arena, that's something that I see myself maybe 3 years, 4 years. I just feel like right now this is my training ground, right? So I can't go in introducing policy if I don't know about the terrain, if I don't know about students and protocol. So I'm right now I'm just being trained, and I'm being given the opportunity to witness and see how things are done, so that when I say, well, this is how I think things ought to be done, I have that experience of working in that environment of where things were done a certain way. So policy making, teaching will always be. I think I would always be in the classroom. I just love that interaction. I've taught online and it was okay, and we had to because of the pandemic. I was teaching at National Louis University, so I was online with my students, but online does not even compare to the actual classroom. Just the interactions you have, the discussions. Someone disagrees with you. We're there face to face. Unlike online where if you're using Zoom or you're using Google Meets, it doesn't have that same feel. So for me, policy making, becoming an author, and but staying in the classroom. If that means it's teaching one class, that I'll do it.
So what I want you to leave one parting thought, because as I said, you had to change your view. You had to change your perspective to be where you are today. So what is a piece of advice you would give to someone who thinks that, like you were working for 24, 25 years at that bank, and one day life just changed? Because we tend to get into that mindset, well, I've been anchored here for 20 something years and I'll be okay. I'm gonna have this job will always be here. And we cannot stay stuck somewhere thinking that that's what is going to happen. Instead, we have to also look to continue to thrive in our life. So what can you give someone a piece of advice to say that they have to keep pressing forward and don't stay complacent and settling at a place or a job?
That if you are currently in a position that you feel like you're there because it provides the means for you to live a certain lifestyle, but deep down within your soul, within your spirit, that there's something else that you want to do, get started with that thing that you feel called to while you're working that job that you're currently in. Like with me, I didn't get started until after I was downsized. In hindsight, maybe I could have gotten started while I was working at the bank, and maybe there would have been an opportunity for me to work at the bank in a capacity of teaching or something related to education. I don't know, but I always tell people, if you feel God is calling you to something, get started now. Don't wait until, we tend to, want to say, okay, this is where I am right now, so this is what I'm going to focus on. Once that ends, then I'm going to focus on this. Once that ends, then no, allow things to overlap a little bit. If you're working an 8 to 5, but you feel called to do this, get started, volunteer. Right. That was one of the things that I did when I was after I was downsized, was that I just began to do a lot of volunteer work. A lot of it related to the pastorate at my son's school, and then just other things related to education, anything that I could do just to learn. So that would be one thing I would say is, get started now, even if you're in that job that you're just not crazy about, but it's providing the resources for you to live, for you to sustain the livelihood that you have. Get started with that. And the other thing was just be open, right? Be open to every opportunity that comes your way. I don't care how small, how minuscule it might appear. Be open to it, because it's the small opportunities that can lead to something big. It's the relationships that can open doors for you. And that's what allowed me while I was in school. There was some relationships that I had that allowed me to do the internship where I did my internship. And there was a relationship that allowed me to start working at National Louis University as an adjunct. So build relationships. I know when in my case, being downsized, you don't want to share that with everybody, but then you realize that there's a blessing in when things happen to us, how what we view as being detrimental or this horrible event actually can be a blessing to others. So share your stories with others, because then you'll realize that there are others who might have similar stories, but then there are also others who are going through what you're going, who are possibly experiencing what you experienced, and you can, minister to them while they're going through that storm. So, don't be ashamed of what, if you're downsized, don't be ashamed about it. It happens to everybody. All right. I mean, Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, was fired from the company he helped found, but he came back strong, and look at Apple now, and so it happens to many people, right? And so don't shy away from sharing your experience with people, but most definitely take advantage of every opportunity, because that's the one thing that I feel. Success isn't guaranteed, but I do feel that opportunities will present themselves. But sometimes, because they're not major opportunities, people tend to ignore them. My mindset now is, I don't care how small of an opportunity it is, I'm going to look into it. I'm going to take advantage of it, because I now realize that small opportunity can lead to something major.
Well, I thank you for your time today, Pastor Doug. You have given a lot of tidbits of, the whole key is opportunity, being open and being teachable, wanting to learn, and going through that transition in your life to get to your true calling. Because at the end of the day, you always had it in your spirit that you wanted to teach. And you felt that angst when you were sitting over there in Harrisburg pulling in the money. But you kept saying, oh, well, the money looked good, so I'm going to stay here. But then the universe, God had a way of saying, no, you're not going to stay here. You're going to go and do what I know that you need to be doing. And that's what we have to understand. You are not in control of what it is that where you need to be traveling to. So you have to put it in his hands and follow and be obedient, and the rest will come.
Yep. Many other plans in a man's heart, but it's the Lord's purpose. It's the Lord who directs his steps. So yes.
This concludes this episode of Change Your View. Let this conversation help you navigate life's challenges, emerging from that seemingly endless pause that you are experiencing. Regain command of your own path and resist being boxed in. Visit hsjackson.com for more inspiring and eye-opening discussions. Stop walking in the shadows of other individuals. No longer allow inferior perspectives to brainwash you. Do not be forgotten. You have the authority and power over you. Make the most of your abilities. Thank you for listening. Until next time.